This water delivery guy, Park Hun, goes past a playground. A girl sees a coin lying below, and this boy presses it under his foot. The girl says, "If it is heads, then it's yours. If it is tails, then it's mine." Then the boy looked at it, and it was heads, but the boy did not know that it was heads. The girl picks up the coin. The boy tries to snatch the coin from her. Suddenly, he spots her broken finger. Even though the girl is unaware of the injury, Hun quickly identifies the fracture. Taking action, he grabs an ice cream from a child, eats the treat, and repurposes the stick as an improvised plaster cast. Using the girl's hair tie, he secures the stick to support her injured finger. Post-treatment, Hun asks for his fees, but the girl points out that she never requested his assistance. Amid this, the girl's father shows up and escorts her away. The father rushes his daughter, Young Min, to the hospital where the doctor tells him that her finger is indeed broken and whoever attempted the makeshift cast did a great job. The doctor then directs a nurse to accompany the patient for an X-ray. However, the nurse guides the father and daughter to follow a blue line on the floor to reach the X-ray room. While struggling to locate the radiology department, they unexpectedly cross paths with Hun, who's there to deliver water containers. As Hun tries to assist them, he notices the father experiencing chest pain. Concerned, Hun places his hand on the man's chest and asks if he experiences breathlessness while sleeping. The father, however, dismisses it, insisting that he is okay. Despite the father's claims of well-being, his visible discomfort suggests otherwise. Before he can be treated, all the doctors are urgently summoned to the emergency department due to a bus truck collision that left 15 people in critical condition. While the medical team attends to the accident victims, Young Min's father begins to lose consciousness. Concerned for her father, Young Min approaches a nurse seeking assistance. Unfortunately, amidst the chaos, nobody takes her seriously, making it difficult for her to get the attention her father urgently needs. Frustrated and desperate for attention, Young Min unleashes a scream, momentarily grabbing everyone's focus. However, the doctors remain occupied with other patients. Amid this, a doctor named Swan approaches Young Min, inquiring about what she needs. Upon learning about her father's condition, Swan begins examining him. Unfortunately, another emergency requires Swan's attention, and she instructs Dr. Kim to take Young Min's father for a chest X-ray and blood tests. Worried about the girl and her father, Hun decides to accompany them in the elevator. Young Min's father loses consciousness and collapses. Han and the doctor quickly lay him on the floor for immediate care. Suspecting pneumonia, Dr. Kim hurries to gather the necessary equipment for intubation to stabilize the patient's condition. Hun places his hand on the man's chest and promptly identifies that he's experiencing a cardiac arrest. At that moment, Dr. Kim arrives and starts inserting a tube through the patient's mouth to facilitate breathing. However, Hun intervenes, insisting that the patient is suffering from a myocardial infarction and heart failure. Initially skeptical, Dr. Kim hesitates until Hun firmly orders him to follow his instructions. Upon Hun's insistence, Dr. Kim attempts to listen to the patient's heartbeat and realizes it is indeed a cardiac arrest. Dr. Kim initiates CPR while a nurse fetches the defibrillator. Taking command, Hun uses the equipment to administer an electric charge to the heart, aiming to restore normal heartbeat. Soon, the patient's heart begins pumping again. He is immediately taken to the operating theater and prepared for an operation, but the doctors are too busy with the accident victims that they have no time for it. Dr. Kim desperately calls for a surgeon, but no one is available. Seeing this, tears well up in Young Min's eyes. She urges Hun to operate on her father. However, Hun responds that he cannot risk losing his license. As he is about to leave, the girl takes out a coin from her pocket and gives it to him as his operation fees, begging him to save her father's life. Seeing her distressed, Young Min, Hun finally decides to help her. Implementing precautionary steps, he steps into the operating theater. The other doctors quickly identify him as an outsider, but Hun stays strong as he begins the operation. The onlooking doctors are amazed by his precise cuts that miraculously avoid causing any bleeding. Meanwhile, Dr. Man from the hospital observes the surgery from above. Seeing Hun's skills, he asks Dr. Kim why the patient didn't bleed, to which Dr. Kim responds that he doesn't know. Surprisingly, our regular water delivery guy happened to be one of North Korea's top cardiac surgeons. Despite his ordinary appearance, Hun possessed extraordinary medical skills. There was a remarkable incident when a surgery he performed in North Korea experienced a power outage. However, he skillfully completed the operation, ultimately saving the patient. Despite his exceptional abilities, fate took an unexpected turn, leading him to end up in South Korea. In the present day, Hun continues the operation on Young Min's father. Soon, Swan enters the operation theater and recognizes him as an outsider. She demands he stop the procedure, but Hun insists he'll stop only if she's ready to take over. Other doctors support him due to his remarkable skills. The lady doctor suggests to Swan that they can question the outsider after saving the patient's life. Infuriated, Swan calls for security. However, before she can guide them in, Hun has already disappeared, having completed the operation earlier than anticipated. With security in tow, Swan searches for Hun and eventually locates him. She delivers a slap to Hun's face, accusing him of conducting an illegal operation. Hun fires back, asserting that she's not one to pass judgment because she abandoned a patient in need. Swan attempts another slap, but Hun stops her, causing her to strike him with the other hand. In the midst of this, Swan receives a call from Dr. Kim revealing that the patient is in critical condition, displaying symptoms of polymorphic ventricular tachycardia. Faced with this news, Swan thinks of involving the police, but Han suggests giving the patient 20 milliliters of magnesium to stabilize his condition, showcasing his surgical knowledge. Meanwhile, Young Min's father receives attention from another senior and skilled doctor in the hospital. Jae-jun observing the critical condition, Jae-jun directs his team to administer 20 milliliters of magnesium, miraculously. The patient stabilizes, leaving Swan stunned as the same magnesium treatment was earlier suggested by Hun. Even though Swan acknowledges Hun's skills, she insists on having him arrested for conducting an unauthorized surgery. Jae-jun intervenes, telling Hun the significance of obtaining permission before operating in a hospital where they are not affiliated. Since the patient's life is saved, Jae-jun releases Hun with the condition that he must never return to the hospital. As Hun makes his way out, Dr. Manon calls out to him. However, suspecting that Dr. Manon is trying to punish him for what he has done, Hun evades the situation and escapes from the hospital. He is running from Dr. Min because he doesn't want to lose his license. Though he doesn't work in a big hospital, he manages to get paid triple the amount of a regular doctor. It is because his patients are gangsters, and because they are wanted, their henchmen are unable to take them to a proper hospital. One day, a patient arrived with appendicitis. Hun began the operation and demanded a substantial sum as a fee. However, when the henchmen tried to attack him instead of paying, he showed them their boss's unstitched wound that would remain open until they paid him. Now, the men were forced to pay Hun. Hun declined the card payment and ordered them to pay him in cash. When the henchmen tried to pay him half, Hun once again inflicted pain on the boss. Finally, he managed to get the full payment. Back to the present day, Dr. Man attempts to reach Hun, but his efforts fall short when Hun successfully escapes in his truck. Mun trails him to his clinic and encourages him to join the hospital team. Initially hesitant, Hun changes his mind upon seeing a down payment of $50,000. The reason he needed that substantial amount of money traces back to years ago when Hun served as a cardiac surgeon at a military hospital. One day, he was ordered to save a man by giving him a new kidney. The donor was the man's daughter. However, when Hun saw a red band on the girl's wrist, he was shocked to his very core. It was the same band he gave to his friend Jae many years ago when they were kids. When he uncovered the woman's face, he learned that the girl was indeed his friend who went missing after getting kidnapped by the North Korean government. Instead of saving the man's life, Hun saved the life of the man's daughter. He fled the area with her in his arms, intending to seek asylum. However, his plan went awry when the government turned against him, aligning with the North Koreans who had previously disrupted his life. In a dramatic turn of events while evading the North Koreans, he found himself cornered. She sacrificed herself by taking a bullet meant for Hun and ended up hanging from the railing in an attempt to save him. Hun also got shot for causing trouble. He was arrested by the South Korean police, which prevented his capture by the North Koreans. Yet, a few days later, he received shocking news. Jae was alive and had been taken back to North Korea. Driven by an overwhelming desire to reunite with his love, Hun sought the assistance of Mr. Lim, a person known for rescuing individuals from North Korea. Mr. Lim informed Hun that he had located Jae in a North Korean camp and even provided a video as proof. However, the rescue came at a steep cost, $50,000. Hun was struggling with financial constraints until he crossed paths with Dr. Man. He managed to seal the deal that would enable him to secure Jae's rescue. However, things take an unexpected turn when Changyi, Hun's friend, informs him that she has seen Jae in the hospital. Hun immediately visits the hospital with Dr. Man and finds Jae there. However, he is unable to locate her. Infuriated at Mr. Lim for lying to him, Hun holds him by his collar and demands answers for Jae's whereabouts, saying that he has seen her in the hospital. Mr. Lim responds that he might have seen someone else because if she was her, she should have contacted her. Reflecting on Mr. Lim's words, Hun gradually calms down and exits the store. As he leaves, an unknown person throws money at Mr. Lim, revealing that all orders related to Hun and Jae are orchestrated by this mysterious figure. Upon agreeing to collaborate with Dr. Man, Hun receives checks of $50,000. He promptly hands the amount to Mr. Lim. However, a surprising twist unfolds as Hun tears all the checks in half, giving only one portion to Mr. Lim. He declares that the remaining halves will be given once the task is completed. With these words, Hun departs from the store, leaving Mr. Lim visibly frustrated. Han is finally hired by the hospital, but he and Swan remain at odds, with him labeling her as a quack and her perceiving him as someone who disregards the law. One day, a patient's condition suddenly worsens, and the doctors feel helpless. She had signed a DNR form, meaning they cannot perform life-saving measures like CPR. Hun, however, can't bear to watch her die. He desperately uses electric shocks and CPR to revive her. During the procedure, Hun notices a familiar band on her wrist, the same one he gave Jae. Eager to find out how she got it, he calls the hospital where she was transferred, but they have no information. Meanwhile, Swan learns of Hun's actions and is furious. Unlike Swan, Hun is determined to keep the patient alive so he can question her about the band. He begins intense practice for the difficult tumor removal surgery. On the other hand, Swan is seen standing near the patient. It is revealed that the woman is her mother who left her when she was a child. Swan begged to stay with her mother, but the woman rebuked her and ordered her to stay with her wealthy dad until now. Swan is unable to understand why her mother left her. She didn't want her to suffer more, so she was infuriated at Hun's actions. However, when her mother regains consciousness for a moment and grabs her hand, Swan decides to do whatever it takes to save her life. She calls Jae-jun, who is also her boyfriend, and begs him to save her mother's life. However, Jae-jun can't help her, as he is instructed by the patient's guardian, aka San's dad, not to do her surgery. It is because there are only 5% success chances, and they can't do such a surgery in which they are sure that the patient will die. Desperate to be with her mother again, Swan turns to Hun, handing him the coin as a fee and urging him to perform her mother's surgery. Hun, moved by her plea, agrees to assist. The patient is brought into the operating room, and soon, Hun joins the surgical team. Swan's father, Dr. O, who is also the hospital owner, orders Hun not to proceed with the operation. Despite Dr. O's instructions, Hun insists he has permission from the patient's guardian, Swan. The operation commences, and Jae-jun, San's boyfriend, joins Dr. O outside the operating room. Initially, everything goes smoothly until the patient's condition takes a turn for the worse, experiencing heart failure during tumor removal. She tragically loses her life. Though the operation ends, Swan is unable to accept her mother's death. Distraught, she starts operating alone, ignoring Hun's attempts to intervene. Unwilling to face the harsh reality, Swan is lost in her grief. In this challenging moment, Hun stands by her side, offering comfort and support. Jae-jun, witnessing Swan embracing Hun, feels displeased with the situation. The next day, a meeting is called to discuss Hun's actions during Swan's mother's operation. Jae-jun takes the opportunity to criticize Hun, pointing out that the surgery was pursued despite knowing the patient had a slim chance of survival. Acknowledging the mistake, Hun apologizes to Swan. Swan urges everyone to move forward, accepting that the surgeon did his best. However, Jae-jun refuses to let the matter rest. He accuses Hun of performing the operation solely for financial gain. Surprisingly, instead of refuting the accusation, Hun admits to the allegation. It appears that he chooses not to reveal San's desperate plea for the surgery. Hun instructs Jae-jun to drop the issue. As he is about to leave, Hun is stopped by Jae-jun. This time, Hun retaliates, accusing Jae-jun of selecting patients based on their chances of survival. Jae-jun, aware of his mistake, remains silent and refrains from responding. After everyone departs, Swan talks to Jae-jun, telling him that he may be taking his frustration out on Hun due to his inability to operate on her mother. Jae-jun is not happy to hear Swan taking Hun's side. Later, Swan visits her mother's home but finds it locked. Soon, she encounters Jae, who turns out to be her mother's previous doctor. Jae introduces herself as Sony and unlocks the door, allowing Swan to enter her mother's home. Inside, she reveals a collection of photographs of important events in San's life. It indicates that her mother had been observing her all this time. Jae explains that San's mother believed she would be happier with her wealthy father. She feared Swan would resent her if she didn't give her to him. Hearing this, Swan breaks down. Seeing her mother's face in place of Jae provides comfort during this emotional moment. On the flip side, Hun receives a call from Mr. Lim, who informs him that he has located Jae. She instructs Hun to meet near his clinic with the remaining pieces of the checks. However, before Hun can discuss further with Mr. Lim, a mysterious man emerges from behind. He shoots a truck, causing it to collide with Mr. Lim's car. That man turns out to be Jin Soo, the North Korean officer. It was under his watch that Hun managed to escape. His superiors accused him of betrayal, cut his finger, and kicked him out of the organization as a punishment for losing Hun. Now, he wants to take revenge on Hun. But there is another mission he and Jae are working on. Back in the present day, Mr. Lim is critically injured and urgently needs surgery. Hun rushes into his clinic and prepares for the operation. Dr. Mun arrives and attempts to stop Hun, advising him to wait for an ambulance. However, Hun, unwilling to delay, proceeds with the surgery. During the operation, he discovers that a rib bone broke and pierced into Lim's heart. Despite the dim lighting, Hun skillfully performs the surgery, successfully removing the bone from the ventricle and stitching the wound. Dr. Man is astonished at Hun's ability to operate in such challenging conditions with low lighting and less equipment. Shortly after, the ambulance arrives, and Mr. Lim is transferred to the hospital for further treatment. However, after some time, Hun struggles to locate Lim in the hospital. He inquires with the receptionist, but no one seems to know his whereabouts. Just then, Hun receives a message from Lim's number, stating that he is heading to China and won't be in touch again. When Hun tries calling Lim, his calls go unanswered, as the phone is now in Gino's possession. It is revealed that Gino was the one who orchestrated Lim's disappearance from the hospital. If Lim had disclosed Jae's location to Hun, Gino's plan would have been ruined. Suddenly, it dawns on Hun that Gino had mentioned seeing Jae in the hallway. Realizing the facility is equipped with surveillance cameras, he decides to review the CCTV footage to verify Jae's presence. He attempts to access the security room, but the guards kick him out. Upon learning about Hun's girlfriend from Changi, Swan decides to lend a helping hand. At night, they discreetly enter the security room and zoom in on Jae's face. But the image is too blurry for them to recognize her. However, upon seeing the girl in the footage, Swan recalls encountering her during the visit to her mother's house. To get a clearer look at Jae, Swan accompanies Hun to his apartment, where they watch the video of Jae in the camp. Swan immediately recognizes her as the woman who treated her mother. Eager to learn more, the duo heads to the hospital where Swan's mother had been treated. There, they inquire about a woman named Jae but find nothing. As they stand outside the hospital, Jae walks toward them. Tears fill Hun's eyes as he can hardly believe that Jae is standing right before him, presenting the band to her. Hun inquires if she recognizes him. However, Jae declines to acknowledge him, stating that she made the band for her patient. Despite Hun's attempts to jog her memory, Jae shows no signs of recollection. Tired of Hun's persistent questioning, she firmly instructs him to leave her alone. This is the end of the video. Subscribe for the next part.